Jung Tae-hyun had spent 55 nights sleeping on the sidewalks of Los Angeles, testing which woman would treat him like a person instead of an inconvenience. Imani Grant was the only one who did. A spare key, a couch, 90 days of a truth she never knew was a lie. At her kitchen table, he finally told her everything. His real name, the 4 companies, the marriage his father was arranging, the $11 million he'd refused to touch for 3 months, just to find out if anyone would help a man who had nothing. She didn't say yes. She didn't say no. She said she needed time. That same day, Tae-hyun told his father he wasn't marrying Yuri Song, and his mother asked, out loud, what a family like Imani's could possibly bring them. His own mother came around first, quietly, in Imani's kitchen. His father gave him an ultimatum and lost. And across the Pacific, Yuri Song's father received the news that the alliance was off, and promised, to no one in particular, that the Jung family would lose slowly for it. Welcome back. If this is your first time here, parts 1 through 3 are everything you need. Subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss what comes next. Now let's get into part 3. Song Chul-min did not believe in the kind of revenge that made headlines. He had built a shipping fortune in Busan across 3 decades on the specific, patient conviction that headlines were for men who'd already lost. Visible retaliation was a confession that you had no better move available. He had a better move available. The Jung family's import license renewal is due in 6 weeks, he told his attorney, over a call placed at 4 in the morning Busan time, deliberately timed so the man on the other end would be groggy enough to simply listen instead of arguing. Los Angeles Customs relies on a bilateral trade certification that runs through a regulatory body I have relationships with. I want those relationships tested, quietly. I don't want anything blocked outright. That would be traceable, and traceable is amateur. I want the renewal process to become considerably slower and considerably more expensive than it has ever been for that family, for reasons nobody can point directly back to me. That's a significant undertaking for a broken engagement, the attorney said carefully. It's not about the engagement, Chul-min said. It's about a family that spent a decade cultivating an alliance with mine, then discarded it, the moment their son decided a woman with nothing to offer was worth more than everything my daughter's family could have provided. I don't require them to suffer, particularly, I require them to understand, precisely, what an alliance with the Song family was actually worth, now that they no longer have it. His daughter, when she learned of the plan 3 days later, not from her father, who considered business matters beneath the dinner table, but from a cousin who worked in the family office, found him in his study reviewing shipping manifests with the specific unhurried satisfaction of a man executing a plan he expected to work. You're going after his father's license, Yuri said. It wasn't a question. I'm testing a relationship, Chul-min said, without looking up. There's a difference. I was relieved when the engagement ended, father. I told you that at the time. I have no interest in you fighting a war on my behalf, over a marriage I never wanted in the first place. This isn't on your behalf, Chul-min said, finally meeting her eyes. It's on the family's behalf. There's a difference there as well, though I don't expect you to see it the way I do at your age. I see it exactly the way it is, Yuri said. You're punishing a man for choosing honesty over convenience, because it embarrassed you in front of people whose opinions you've spent 30 years cultivating. That's not protecting the family. That's protecting your own pride, dressed up as something nobler. Chul-min's expression didn't change, but something in his posture stiffened. You may leave now, he said. This conversation has run its course. Yuri left. She did not, however, stop thinking about it, and by that evening, she had made a decision her father would not learn about for weeks. She found Hyunok, her father's longtime assistant and one of the few people in the household who had known her since childhood, in the kitchen preparing tea neither of them particularly needed. He's already made the calls, Hyunok confirmed, not looking up. This morning, before your conversation. 3 regulatory contacts. He's asked them to slow the Jung license renewal, quietly, citing nothing specific. Can it be undone? Not by you, Hyunok said. Not directly. Your father doesn't reverse decisions once he's made them. You know that better than anyone in this house. But delays like this rely on cooperation from people who owe him favors, not people who are legally obligated to act against their own judgment. If those people were given a reason to believe the favor wasn't worth the risk anymore, the pressure would simply stop mattering. What kind of reason? Hyunok finally looked up, something careful in her expression. I couldn't say. I only handle his correspondence, not his conscience. She paused. Though I will say, for what it's worth, I've worked in this house for 22 years, and I've never once seen your father lose an argument to you before today. Whatever you said to him, it landed somewhere it doesn't usually reach. It didn't feel like it landed, Yuri said. It felt like I was talking to a wall, wearing my father's face. Walls take time, Hyunok said, but they do crack, if the right pressure keeps finding the same spot. Imani noticed the shift in Tae-hyun before he said anything about it directly, the particular quality of distraction he carried into their shared evenings that he hadn't carried even during the worst of the 90 days. Something's wrong at the company, she said, 3 weeks into their arrangement becoming something neither of them called temporary anymore. They'd found a 2-bedroom in Culver City together, modest by his family's standards, and enormous by hers. A compromise they'd landed on after several genuinely funny arguments about square footage neither of them actually cared about. The import license renewal is taking longer than it should, Tae-hyun said. Longer than it's ever taken, in 11 years of my father running this business. Woo Jin thinks someone's applying pressure through the regulatory relationships. I think he's right. Song's father, Imani said. Not a question. Probably. Tae-hyun set down the folder he'd been staring at without reading. I don't have proof yet. Men like him don't leave proof. They leave delays, extra paperwork, phone calls that don't get returned as quickly as they used to. It's not an attack you can point to. It's just friction, everywhere at once, until the friction costs you something real. Is this because of us? It's because of a decision I made, Tae-hyun said. I'm not going to let you carry that as though it's yours to apologize for. I chose you. If there's a cost to that, it's mine to pay, not yours to feel guilty about. I didn't say I felt guilty, Imani said, though something in her tone suggested she'd been circling the feeling for longer than she wanted to admit. I said I wanted to understand what's actually happening, instead of watching you carry it alone the way you carried the whole 90 days alone. I thought we were past that particular habit. Tae-hyun was quiet for a moment, something shifting in his expression. You're right, he said. I'm sorry. I think some part of me still defaults to managing things privately before I remember I don't have to anymore. Old habit, Imani said. I've got a few of my own. We'll work on it together. She sat down across from him, reaching for his hand. Tell me everything. Not the summary. All of it. The way you'd tell Woo Jin. He told her everything, the license delays, the regulatory friction, his father's mounting concern that the business itself was now exposed in a way it hadn't been in years, the specific slow-motion pressure of a man like Song Chul-min who had no interest in a fight anyone could see coming. What does your father want to do about it? Imani asked, once he'd finished. Fight it the way he's always fought things, Tae-hyun said. Leverage. Counter-pressure, find something Song needs, and threaten to withhold it. He rubbed his eyes, the specific exhaustion of a man watching an old pattern reassert itself in a new crisis. I don't think that's the right approach anymore. I think it's the approach that got us into this exact situation in the first place, treating every relationship like a transaction with a hidden weapon underneath it. What's the right approach then? I don't know yet, Tae-hyun admitted. But I know it starts with not becoming my father to solve a problem my father's instincts helped create. Imani was quiet for a moment, turning something over. Can I offer an outside perspective? Not because I understand shipping licenses or regulatory pressure. I don't, and I won't pretend to. But I've spent my whole life watching my own father handle conflict a certain way, and maybe there's something in it that translates. Tell me, Tae-hyun said. My father delivered mail to the same 300 houses for 31 years, Imani said. Every single one of those houses had a story he knew, who was going through a divorce, whose kid was struggling, who'd just lost a job. When conflicts came up on his route, and they did, People getting into it over property lines or barking dogs, or whatever small thing neighbors find to fight about. He never once tried to win the argument for whoever complained to him first. He tried to figure out what the person on the other side was actually protecting. 9 times out of 10, it wasn't the thing they said it was. It was pride, or fear, or feeling disrespected in front of people who mattered to them. She looked at him steadily. I don't know, Sang Chul-min. But I'd bet good money this isn't really about a license. It's about the embarrassment. Tae-hyun said slowly, something clicking into place. Not the business. He's not actually worried about losing money on this. He's worried about losing face in front of people whose opinions he's spent 30 years cultivating. That sounds like a problem leverage can't actually fix, Imani said. You can't threaten someone out of feeling disrespected. You can only address the disrespect directly, or find a way to let them save face without either of you pretending nothing happened. Tae-hyun looked at her for a long moment, something warm and slightly amazed crossing his face. You just solved in 5 minutes what my father's entire legal team has been circling for 2 weeks. I didn't solve anything, Imani said, though something pleased flickered at the corner of her mouth. I just told you what my dad taught me watching him hand-deliver birthday cards to people he'd never met, because he figured out early that most fights aren't really about what they look like they're about. I'd like to meet him someday, Tae-hyun said, not just as the man whose lessons keep solving my family's problems secondhand. He'd like that, Imani said. Fair warning, he'll ask you about your route, not your business, your actual daily route, what you see, who you talk to. That's how he sizes people up, not by what they own, by whether they pay attention to the people around them. I think I can pass that test, Tae-hyun said. I've had considerable practice recently. A broken engagement just turned into a quiet war over an import license. Like and subscribe to help us grow so we can create more content like this one. If you're already invested in how far Sang Chul-min is willing to take this, it's about to get considerably more complicated. Stay close. Jung Sang-hoon called an emergency meeting of the company's senior leadership on a Thursday morning. The specific controlled urgency of a man who had spent 4 decades building something he had no intention of watching erode over a delayed permit. The renewal is now 11 days behind schedule, his chief operations officer reported. 3 separate regulatory contacts who have never once been difficult to reach in 15 years of working with this company are suddenly unavailable, or vague, or requiring additional documentation nobody has ever asked for before. Sang-hoon said. Not a question. We can't prove it, the COO said. But the timing is difficult to read any other way. Sang-hoon sat with that for a long moment, the specific stillness of a man, recalculating a battle he hadn't expected to be fighting at 61. He thought of the conversation in his study 3 months earlier, informing his son of the arrangement with the flat certainty of a man who believed the matter settled. He had not expected, at the time, that refusing the arrangement would cost the company anything beyond his own disappointment. He had been wrong about that, and he did not enjoy discovering it. Tae-hyun arrived at the meeting 15 minutes after it started, having been notified late deliberately or not. He chose not to spend energy determining which. I want to handle this directly, Tae-hyun said, once he'd been briefed. Not through counter-pressure, through a direct approach to Sang Chul-min himself. He won't take a meeting with you, Sang-hoon said. Not after everything. Then I'll go to Busan without one scheduled, Tae-hyun said. I'd rather be turned away in person than keep exchanging delayed paperwork through intermediaries who have no actual stake in resolving this. This is exactly the kind of impulsive decision that got us into this position, Sang-hoon said, though something in his tone carried less certainty than the words themselves suggested. No, Tae-hyun said. The decision that got us into this position was choosing an alliance built on leverage instead of respect, 14 years before I was ever old enough to have a say in it. I'm not going to fix that mistake by making the same one again, aimed in a different direction. Sang-hoon studied his son for a long moment, something unfamiliar crossing his composed face. Not quite respect, not yet, but the specific early recognition of a man beginning to understand that his son's convictions might carry more weight than his own instincts had ever given them credit for. Your grandfather built this company on a single import license and a willingness to be underestimated by men who never once bothered learning his name, Sang-hoon said, something distant entering his voice. I built the next 40 years on the opposite instinct, making certain everyone learned my name, and feared what it meant if they crossed me. I don't know which version of that legacy you're planning to build. I find, watching you today, that I am no longer entirely certain my version was the correct one to hand down. I don't think either version is entirely correct, Tae-hyun said. I think grandfather's instinct, being underestimated, staying close to the people who actually made the business work, had something real in it that got lost somewhere between his generation and mine. I'd like to find out if I can build something that keeps what was worth keeping from both of you, instead of simply inheriting whichever version happened to be in charge when I was born. Go, Sang-hoon said finally. But understand, if this fails, the company absorbs the cost of your choice, the same as it absorbed the cost of your disappearance for 90 days. I understand, Tae-hyun said. I'm not asking you to absorb it blindly. I'm asking you to trust that I've learned something in the last 4 months that you spent 40 years never having the chance to learn yourself. Sang-hoon didn't respond immediately, and when he finally did, something in his tone had shifted just slightly, the specific uncertain softness of a man testing whether a new register actually fit him. Your mother believes you learned it from the woman, he said. I find myself less resistant to that possibility than I expected to be a few months ago. I learned some of it from her, Tae-hyun said. The rest, I think, I learned from finally being poor enough, long enough, to understand what you actually taught me by accident. That people show you who they are, by what they do when they have nothing to gain from it. Tae-hyun arrived in Busan without an appointment and without his usual security detail, a deliberate choice meant to signal exactly what he intended it to signal, that he had come to talk, not to posture. Song Chul-min kept him waiting in a lobby for 90 minutes, the specific calculated discourtesy of a man who wanted the wait itself to communicate something. Tae-hyun used the time to review, again, everything Woo Jin had compiled on the regulatory pressure, and to draft, mentally, 3 different versions of an approach depending on how the meeting actually opened. None of his 3 versions accounted for what happened instead. Yuri Song was waiting for him in the office when he was finally admitted. Not her father. He'll be another 20 minutes, she said, without preamble. I asked for a few of them first. I didn't expect to see you, Tae-hyun said. I didn't expect to be here either, Yuri said. But I found out what my father's doing to your family's license, and I decided I wasn't willing to let him do it in my name, even indirectly, without at least telling you what you're actually walking into. She gestured to a chair. He's testing 3 regulatory relationships specifically. If you go in prepared only to discuss the license itself, you'll lose. He wants you defensive. He wants this to feel like a negotiation you're desperate to win. What should I do instead? Don't negotiate the license at all, Yuri said. Address the actual grievance directly. He's not really angry about a permit. He's angry that you embarrassed him in front of people whose respect he spent 30 years cultivating by choosing a woman he considers beneath the family's standing. If you want this to end, you have to give him a way to save that specific piece of pride, separate from the business consequences he's using as a proxy for it. Why are you helping me? Tae-hyun asked. After everything. Because I meant what I said months ago, Yuri said. I was relieved when the arrangement ended. I have no interest in watching my father wage a business war on my behalf over a marriage that would have made neither of us happy. I'd rather see this resolved cleanly than watch it become a story where I'm the reason 2 families destroyed something neither of them can rebuild. Song Chul-min entered exactly as his daughter finished speaking, something unreadable crossing his face at finding the 2 of them already in conversation. I see you've had an early start, he said, addressing Yuri rather than Tae-hyun. I gave him nothing you wouldn't have eventually said yourself, father, Yuri said, standing. I simply saved everyone considerable time getting there. She left the room without waiting for a response. Tae-hyun turned to face Chul-min directly. I didn't come to negotiate the license, he said. I came to apologize for the part of this that was actually mine, the embarrassment I caused you in front of people whose opinion matters to you, by declining an arrangement my father made without asking either of us what we wanted. That part was real, and I own it. The rest, the regulatory pressure on a company that had nothing to do with the decision, isn't proportionate. and I think you know it. Chul-min was quiet for a long moment. You came here to tell me I'm behaving smaller than the man I believe myself to be, he said. I came here to give you the chance to decide that for yourself, Tae-hyun said, instead of having a business consequence decide it for you. He flew to Busan without an appointment and walked straight into the one conversation nobody expected. Like and subscribe to help us grow so we can create more content. If you're already dying to know how Song Chul-min responds. We're almost there. Chul-min did not answer immediately. He crossed to the window overlooking the port, the specific stillness of a man weighing a decision he had not expected to be reconsidering by the time the conversation reached this point. My daughter chose to warn you, he said finally, still facing the window. Against my explicit wishes, I find that I am considerably less angry about it than I expected to be. She did it because she wanted this resolved cleanly, Tae-hyun said. Not because she owed me anything. I know why she did it. Chul-min turned back to face him. I have spent 30 years building a family reputation on the principle that alliances, once broken, are answered decisively. I am discovering, somewhat later in life than I would prefer, that decisiveness and wisdom are not always the same instinct. He studied Tae-hyun for a long moment. The regulatory pressure ends today. I will make the necessary calls before you leave this office. Thank you, Tae-hyun said. Don't thank me, Chul-min said. I'm not doing this as a gift. I'm doing it because my daughter was right, and because continuing would cost me something I value more than watching your family's license stall another month. Her respect, which I find I am no longer entirely willing to trade for pride I can't quite justify to myself anymore. He paused. Tell your father I have no further quarrel with his company. Whatever remains between us is considerably smaller than either of us initially believed. Tae-hyun called his father from the car on the way to the airport, relaying the resolution in terms plain enough that Sang-hoon didn't ask for elaboration. You resolved in one meeting what I'd have spent months trying to counter-leverage, Sang-hoon said, something unfamiliar in his voice. Not quite pride, but its early, uncertain cousin. I didn't resolve it with leverage, Tae-hyun said. I resolved it by giving him a way to be the version of himself he actually wanted to be, instead of the version his pride was forcing him into. I think that's the part you and men like him never learn to try first. Sang-hoon was quiet on the line for a long moment. Your mother mentioned, some weeks ago, that she'd met the woman, he said finally. Imani. She described her as direct, unafraid of difficult conversations. She is, Tae-hyun said. I find myself curious, Sang-hoon said, whether the man who just resolved a 4-decade family rivalry in a single conversation learned that particular skill from her, or whether it was always in him, waiting for someone to give him permission to use it. I think it was always there, Tae-hyun said. I think I just needed someone who'd notice me long enough to let it show. Imani was waiting up when Tae-hyun's flight landed, the specific quiet relief of someone who had spent the day genuinely uncertain how the trip would resolve. It's done, he told her, before she could ask. Chul-min called off the pressure. Yuri helped, actually. Walked me through exactly how to approach him before I even got in the room. I didn't expect that, Imani said. Neither did I. Tae-hyun sat down beside her, exhaustion finally catching up with him now that the adrenaline of the day had nowhere left to go. My father asked about you tonight. Actually asked, not just tolerated the subject. What did he ask? Whether I learned to handle things the way I handled today from you, Tae-hyun said. I think, for the first time since any of this started, he was asking because he actually wanted to understand, not because he was looking for a reason to disapprove. Imani considered that for a moment, something cautiously warm crossing her face. That's progress, she said. Real progress, not just an ultimatum he lost. It is, Tae-hyun agreed. His phone buzzed on the counter. A message from Woo Jin, brief and uncharacteristically urgent for a man who rarely used more punctuation than strictly necessary. Tae-hyun read it twice before setting the phone down. What is it? Imani asked, watching his expression shift. Woo Jin says my father wants a family dinner, Tae-hyun said slowly. All of us. This weekend. He specifically asked that you be there. Your father asked for me by name? He did. Tae-hyun looked at her, something uncertain and hopeful crossing his face at once. I don't know what that means yet. I don't know if it's an olive branch or another test. But he's never once asked for anyone by name in 29 years of my life, including women my mother actually approved of. How do you want to handle it? Imani asked. I want to go, Tae-hyun said. Both of us, without pretending it's smaller than it is. If he's genuinely trying, I don't want to make him work twice as hard to prove it. And if it's another test, I'd rather face it directly than spend the week bracing for it. That sounds like the version of you I met on that sidewalk, Imani said. The one who decided the only way to find the truth about anyone was to stop protecting himself from it. I think that version of me turned out to be useful, Tae-hyun said. I'm glad he showed up. So am I, Imani said, leaning into him. Whatever this weekend turns out to be, we'll face it the way we've faced everything else, together and honestly, regardless of what it costs either of us. The business war is over, but a dinner invitation just raised the real stakes. Comment if you think Sang-hoon is finally coming around, or if this is one more test in disguise. Part 4 is coming.